Did you hear that? That's my magic sideburns, okay? They make magic sideburn noises. Don't look at me. Now listen. Hear that? Magic sideburns. But I got a friend of mine I want to introduce you to. His name is Sideburns McGee. Give it up for Sideburns McGee.
All the way to the chin.
All the way to the chin. All the way to the chin. You see, he went from having stubble to having sideburns, and he's graduated to mutton chops.
Yeah!
Yeah! Give me a high five. Oh, yeah! No, you didn't. Sideburns McGee. There you see him walking around the campfire. Sideburns McGee. There he goes again. Sideburns McGee. Look at him at the campfire. Sideburns McGee. Look at him at the campfire. All together. Sideburns McGee. Look at him around the campfire. Sideburns McGee. There he goes again.
Yes!
He grew some hair. In just the right place. He wouldn't stumble. Wait a minute, there's something missing from this song. We don't have enough bubbles. Sideburns McGee. There he goes again. Sideburns McGee. He's my best friend. Look at the bubbles. Bubbles are pretty. Sideburns are cool. Alright, let's hear it for Sideburns McGee. Here's Stanley and my friends. I've got Peanut Butter Paul, the man with the red balloon, Sideburns McGee, of course, and Cowbell Carl. He's helped me out quite a bit. You guys have been wonderful. I've got a little story I want to tell you. And before we have a little closing kind of a crazy song here, I've got a story of a few weeks ago. I was at home, at the Stanley home. My wife Phyllis and I were at our house. Of course, you know, I'm not always out telling people to stay in school. I have a home life, you know, and you have to balance your work and your family and everything. Y'all would understand that, right? You got to balance things, right? Well, one of the things we decided to do is to just do a family project, and we were going to paint our living room. And so we painted. We had the room. It was just an off-white, and so we decided to go with a darker color, like a maroon type color on one wall. And so we painted that kind of a maroonish type color on one wall. And as soon as we put the paint on, the paint was completely wet. But let me tell you how the rest of the story took place. About a minute later, that paint was just a pinch dryer. And it was still wet though. It was pretty wet. It wasn't quite tacky yet. It was just a little bit drier, that paint was. And we sat there and we just kind of watched that for a while. About a minute later, we came back and we looked at where we just painted that. And the great thing about it was the paint was still kind of wet. It was still wet. But it was just a little bit drier than it had been a couple minutes before. We waited a while. About a minute later, we came back, and that paint was still wet. But it began to just a little bit began to dry, and it was to the point where it was a little bit tacky, you know, tacky to the touch, but not very, very tacky, just a little bit tacky. And we came back about a minute later, and that paint, it was still just a little bit tacky at that time. Not a whole lot, but it was just a little bit, and it dried a little bit more. We noticed that every time we came back to the wall, that just a little bit more of the moisture had gone out of the paint. We came back a minute later and we looked, and that paint was just a little bit more dry. Okay? Now,
oh my gosh. Really?
later in the week on Wednesday night, T.J. Anderson is going to tell you the rest of the story and how it turned out. Okay? He's speaking Wednesday night, and I have told him the rest of the story. I know y'all are wondering how it turned out, but I don't have time tonight to finish the whole story. But that is one of those amazing things that happened. And it is important to make your family a priority. And that's just what I wanted to share about that.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of family.